All right, now we're ready.
All right. Welcome, everyone. As you're coming in, I want to let you know that you're automatically muted. So as you join the call, that'll work out for us. It serves us just by eliminating background noise from our recording. And it helps as our faces are popping up in the speaker boxes as we clear our throats, our cat meows in the background, whatever happens behind us or whatever noises we make won't pop us up for our recording as well. You are able to unmute yourself at any time, but we ask that you wait until the question and answer session towards the end, and otherwise to keep yourself muted unless you're going to be talking to one of us. So I'm Carol Leith. I'm the editor of Plaid for Women, and I'm really happy you guys are joining us for the Preparedness for Uncertainty panel discussion. Plaid for Women is an award-winning digital media platform for women. We're like a mentor in your inbox with a feature article every week that inspires and empowers. You will start receiving those as soon as next week if you don't already. At Plaid, we know you want to be empowered, and in order to do that, you need support, encouragement, and enlightenment. The problem is when you're up against a wall and you don't know what to do next, it makes you doubt yourself. So at Plaid, we believe everyone deserves access to mentors who support, encourage, and enlighten us. We know how it feels to doubt yourself, which is why the writers at Plaid for Women pour out their hearts and souls each month to empower you. It's also why we're bringing this panel discussion to you. I want to give you a little different introduction to these four women today, and we promise that we'll put the links to their official bios in the chat so you can see all of their qualifications. So let's get that started. We're going to start with Gail White. Gail, would you wave to everybody so we know which one we're talking about? Gail likes to scream, not cry. Screaming is her healthy place. When an unemotional screamer adopts children who are highly emotional and deeply wounded, struggle becomes the daily experience. Her adopted sons struggled with accepting Gail and her husband as parents, and they grew up to hate each other. In a family environment of attachment disorders, ADD, and irreconcilable sibling rivalry, screaming was a useful coping mechanism, and everyone not only made it through, but have made it through very well. All right, we're going to go to Rebecca. Rebecca Liston, can you wave? There she is. Rebecca would describe herself as a Weeble, a children's toy with the marketing slogan, "Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down." She is no stranger to the wobbles of life, having left an abusive partner, raised 2 infants on her own, and navigated PTSD after a harrowing car crash. There have been many days, she says, in which she was certain she would stay down forever. But with the tools she was taught, her core belief in herself, and her spiritual practices, she, like a Weeble, manages to bounce back up. And then we have Rhonda Marcus. Rhonda, can you wave? Here she is. Rhonda is like a strong rubber band. She had a multitude of experiences in which she's been pulled in different directions, sometimes all at once, yet she always manages to come back to center. She's faced an abusive marriage, financial ruin, breast cancer, mental health issues, and nearly snapped at each instance. Along the way, she discovered her flexibility, her resilience, and fortitude. So while she may bend and stretch, she knows she won't break. And last but not least, Michelle Gooch. You want to wave? There she is. Michelle pulled her lifeless child off the bottom of a pool, walked away from a thriving career, left a destructive marriage over the course of 3 decades. Like the flower pushing up through the concrete, facing uncertainty has forged in Michelle a great deal of resilience. She's intentionally found tools that work in moments of uncertainty. So these are our panel. This is our panel today. And what I want you to see is that these women have faced uncertainty and they're still learning to thrive in the middle of it. So we're going to also, or again, just a reminder, we'll have their other bios put in the chat. So if you have any questions at any time during our workshop, you can also type those into the chat, and our plan is to get them answered by the end of our time together. But if we don't get to, we'll send it out in an email with all those questions answered after the discussion. So let's get started. So ladies of the panel, I'd love if a couple of you could answer this first question. Do you remember a specific experience where you wished you had done something different in the face of uncertainty? Any one of you, jump right in.
I'll jump in. I feel like I'm really outing myself. This is a really big first question.
It is.
Yeah. So yes. I wanted to say that I think that this is an emotional topic. So you may see that I will find myself getting quite emotional through this entire conversation because it's a big deal. And because I feel the weight of my own personal, uncertainty in this given moment in time and the weight of my clients' uncertainties at this particular time. It's been actually a very difficult January. So I think I'm just gonna shoot from the hip and be so transparent that people might wonder why I'm being quite so transparent, but I think we need to be. I raised my two kids on my own, as you mentioned, Carol, because I left an abusive partner. And when I look back at the uncertainty of that leaving, right? My youngest was not even a year and a half old. And when I think back to how the impact of the leaving and the way in which we had to leave because we did flee, and how, I had to go and stay at my parents' home for a couple of months till we could find somewhere to live. I know I wasn't the best mom. And I think for a lot of that first year, especially after we left, I was really not very present for my children. So I do look back on that with regret. And I think, oh, I wish I had been more resourced. I wish that I had known what to do. But I was in such a position of just wanting to get out that I really wasn't, prepared for the transition. So I feel very lucky that I had my parents' support, right? Because I think if it weren't for them, our life would have turned out very differently. But looking back on that, yeah, sometimes I have some regrets as, just feeling very maybe disconnected as a parent from my kids during that time where I was trying to actually get my feet under me. We ate a lot of boxed macaroni and cheese and a lot of, canned zoodles and crap because I couldn't, bring myself to cook. Like I didn't have it in me. Right. So I look back on that and I wish that I had been able to handle that differently. And on the same token, I'm proud, not to play two sides of that coin. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that we got through it and we survived, but it would have been a nice time to feel like I knew a little bit more about how to make that transition. And so I think that I had a little bit more resources at that time. So that's my big outing.
Thank you. Anyone else want to answer that for us? I know it's a big first question, but to really put out there the uncertainties we faced. Okay, we'll look at some of the others. What is the biggest challenge in being prepared for uncertainty? Michelle, you want to start us off with that one?
Sure.
Oh.
Happy to. Wow, the biggest challenge. That's it. I thought the questions were going to get easier, Carol. I was waiting for the easy questions. What is the biggest challenge in being prepared for uncertainty? I think from where I stand and what I see, I think the biggest challenge is to not see uncertainty as a crisis, to not see uncertainty as something that's insurmountable, which I feel like is how we tend to look at it. Instead, to go, okay, there are some highly stressful events that are going to happen. This is life. We call it life, right? And that's not going to change. So how do I want to respond to that? Because when I see it as crisis or I see it as something that's insurmountable, then my brain shuts down. And so I really need to shift. So that to me is the biggest challenge. Shift how I see it, shift my perspective on uncertainty. Carol, we cannot
Carol.
hear you.
I'm sorry, I had muted myself while you were talking. Gail, I was going to ask Gail what she thought what the biggest challenge was to be prepared for uncertainty.
Well, first, I want to say I really like, Michelle, what you had to say about shifting your perspective. And what I've always found is the biggest challenge for me. I tend to be, I said, a screamer, and maybe a little on the overconfident, arrogant side. And maybe that's you, but you don't know what you don't know, but you think you know. Okay, that has always been my problem in uncertainty. And, in adopting 2 children, we thought we knew a few things. First of all, you get your act together, financially, emotionally, spiritually, you got your act together. Relationally, I got a good husband. He'll make a great father. And all we have to do then is find the right neighborhood, the right schools, the right church, and then we scoop up a little guy who needs all that, and we live happily ever after. That's what we thought we knew. And then you find out about these other things. You find out that there are attachment disorder issues, and you find out about ADD. And you find out that it just doesn't work that way. And so I think recognizing that I just didn't know was the biggest first step in getting help and figuring out that, this is a challenge way beyond anything I could have imagined, but I'm going to get through if I'll just go and if I'll get some help and if I will stop relying on what I thought I knew.
That's a great answer, Gail. Rhonda, did you want to answer this one too?
I wanted to add to actually both. Michelle, could not agree more about that need to shift our perspective on how we think about uncertainty. And to that end, I would say that instead of thinking of ourselves, often we think of uncertainty, you suddenly think victim. And if we can shift to survivor, it's sort of whatever it is that's uncertain hasn't happened yet, but it sort of sets up your framework for accepting more positivity and thinking a little bit more positive, which I know is not always possible. But excuse me, puppy in the background. And then Gail, to your point, and the other thing that I wanted to say about uncertainty, with regard to Michelle, was that sometimes uncertainty isn't bad. I mean, you could go to a party, not knowing anybody, you're uncertain about, excuse me for just a moment, everyone. Sorry. I had told my fellow panelists that my dog sometimes comes in and she's here. So sorry about that. Sometimes you can go to a party and maybe you're uncertain about, should I go? I don't know anybody, but maybe you'll meet your best friend or a future business partner, or maybe your future spouse. So uncertainty isn't always bad. So maybe, again, thinking survivor, not victim. And then to Gail's point, it's so true. You don't know what you don't know. And I think for all of us that have really endured a very uncertain times, which I'm just given the current climate of the world we live in now, I would say we all have. I think it's just accepting the fact that you can't prepare for everything. And just know we are facing uncertainty daily, even before the COVID and everything else. I mean, you face uncertainty when you wake up in the morning. What am I going to wear? Do I work from home? Well, now, do I work from home or do I go into the office? Do I drive through that yellow light or do I stop? Our brains are conditioned to see certain patterns of uncertainty daily, and they don't really stress us out too much. But it's just that notion of that element that comes as a shock that we're not expecting. And it's that if we can get comfortable being uncomfortable, recognize you can only do your best in that moment. Like to what Rebecca was saying about, also I'm getting teary-eyed, because I can totally relate. Raising your kids and just thinking you're trying to save yourself at the same time as you're raising young children. We were very nearly homeless when our house was hit by a tornado a couple of years ago, and our insurance company said, we're not going to pay anymore for your rental house. 3 days after Christmas, you've got 2 weeks to move, and otherwise, sorry. And it was so scary. And you just think you're just going into survival mode. But again, it's you can't think about your kids, and you're just trying to be the best for you and holding everything together. But knowing that you can't always be prepared for uncertainty, and that's okay, as long as you feel like you are doing your best and you are coping, and learning to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. There's other uncertain moments. You take a test and you're waiting for the results, whether it's a mammogram or a mole on your back. You apply for a job and you don't hear for a week. There are those moments of uncertainty, and that gap of unknowing is very settling. But when you learn to stretch beyond your comfort zone, I feel like that's where we are building resilience, and that's the part that makes us stronger. And when we know that habits that we formed in the past may not help us today, we learn to adapt new habits, right? And I think that's kind of what I think is important.
Thank you. Well, and some of the things you touched on kind of answer this next question. So I'll see if anybody wants to add to that. What are some common misconceptions that people have about facing uncertainty? Any of you ladies want to answer that?
Well, I think what Rhonda said was, oh, Gail, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to throw something out to start. I think the most common misconception is that you can see the end results from where you stand. That causes for me paralysis. If I want to see how this is all going to come out, and in talking with others, sometimes they want you to describe, well, where is this going to lead to, and where's this going to lead to, and where you don't know. But what you really need to have is the next step. One step I can take, I'm pretty confident that this one won't get me in any trouble and it's moving in the right direction, and I'll take that step. After I take that step, I have a plan. I know where I want it to go, but I can't see the end. And sometimes, generally, we talked about changing perspective, but once I take a couple of steps, everything is clearer now. And I can see that what I thought was going to be the best solution maybe isn't, but I see where that good solution is. And so that for me is just, understand I'm not going to see the whole thing. The world is not going to lay it all out in front of me, and just take one step. You can always step back if that's not right and keep going if it looks like it's good, but change your perspective by movement. Do something and look around. That's been good for me.
Thank you. All right, Michelle, did you want to answer that?
I was just thinking that what Rhonda had said was uncertainty doesn't have to be bad. And that's a common misconception, that uncertainty is bad. So I think one of the questions we ask ourselves is, do I really need certainty? I mean, that's a great question. Do I really need it? Isn't most of life, as Rhonda mentioned, uncertain? And so perhaps it's time to just see it as a challenge. challenge yourself. I don't need certainty. What are the advantages of it? What are the disadvantages of it? If I accept uncertainty as an adventurous part of life, would I experience this moment differently? I think that changes it for you.
Michelle, can I ask you a question about that? And it might be, have I ever had certainty?
Man, that'll make you think. Okay, so with all of that in mind, if we don't really have a certainty and we're dealing with the uncertain, what are some of the most critical changes that we need to make in order to face the future with confidence? Rebecca, do you have any thoughts on that?
As soon as you asked the question, Carol, I thought about Rhonda, the rubber band. I thought about my idea of the Wobble. Like, I think we do well to practice flexibility, right? Practice that. Now, sometimes, the word control has gotten a bit of a bad rap. So I'll use it a little bit here, but in the best of ways. Like, sometimes it's a trauma response to want to control our environment and what's going on as a way to avoid or protect from potential uncertainties, or to make sure that we're mitigating all risk so that we can feel safe. Nothing wrong with that. It's a response for a reason. It's there to protect you, and that's okay when you're in an actual emergency. And when you're not in an actual emergency, that tightness, those control mechanisms that we put in place to protect ourselves, we can practice playing with them and becoming more flexible in them in small ways, so that we grow our ability to flex, to be the rubber band that Rhonda's talking about, to wobble and to wobble, right? And to know that you're going to come back to center, and to actually get okay with wobbling, because there actually is not one thing. Well, what's that saying? Death and taxes. Those are the only two things we can count on, right? So really, and I don't think that that's untrue, especially in Canada, we pay a lot of taxes. But anyway, aside from that, so I think it's, when we're not in an actual emergent situation, pressing up against our own boundaries, our own walls, these things that I'm doing with my hand, right? The bumpers on the bowling alley, like pushing them a little bit, even just in small ways, to build flexibility. And that could be as simple as, tonight we're having dinner, and every time I make mashed potatoes, I also make gravy. Tonight, I'm making mashed potatoes. I am not making gravy. We're all going to put sour cream on those potatoes, right? We're just going to put butter on them. I'm going to, whatever, who cares? Some tiny little thing that just helps us start to feel and to see, oh, hey, look, I made potatoes. I didn't make gravy. It was okay. And that might sound like a small thing, but when you are coming out of trauma, when you are facing lots of uncertainty, just those small little things can be huge wins and huge examples to ourselves of, that we can face things that are different and we can actually be okay.
Yes. Really quick, for those of you that have joined us since the beginning, if you have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll get to those towards just a little bit later. So I love that answer, Rebecca. I love, just the little things to make you flexible. That's really great. I'm thinking through all of this. There's so much to go. Oh yeah. So as we're working toward accepting the uncertainty, how do we build a resilience of sorts to face that better, to to look into that as we move in, knowing there's an uncertainty in every day. How do we build a resilience to that so that it becomes easier to make those flexible choices?
I will jump in because I want to piggyback off of something Rebecca has talked about, the weeble and the wobbling. And one of the things my chiropractor is my #1 health coach. And she makes us sit on this thing called the Wobble Cushion. And if you've been to chiropractor or whatever, and lately she has me doing it 3 times a day. The thing about a wobble cushion is it forces your muscles to be, and you said, Rebecca, practice. It practices your muscles now that you're sitting in a Zoom meeting and you're sitting on, you're reading and you're on your computer and you're doing all of this, and your muscles need to move. And that wobble cushion makes you move from side to side. Your muscle is practicing being off balance all the time, and that strengthens. Now, I went through a period a few months back where I'm not going to do that, and I woke up one day, I'm very healthy, and suddenly my back went out. I couldn't move. I had to think about how to roll over in the bed. I had to think about how to, sit on a chair. My back just said no more. And of course, I went to the chiropractor to get adjusted and all that kind of stuff. And they asked the first question, are you doing your wobbling exercise? And I went, no. So I think mental, emotional, I love the change one thing, just wobble, practice wobbling, and that strengthens you for a time when you're really going to need it.
I love that. Practice stepping into that uncertainty, practice that continually, and you'll get better. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
So the idea of building resilience, I love that. Practice wobbling, practice flexibility. I think you also need to watch your to build resilience. You have to watch what's happening in your mind, what you're doing with your thoughts, because your thoughts will take you to a dark place in a millisecond. So I would say practice, we're using that term practice. I would say practice finding opportunity, practice shifting your mindset, practice, okay, what does this, instead of saying, oh, the sky is falling, we're all going to die, whatever the scenario is, practice saying, what does this make possible? So now I'm pushing myself to look for the opportunity instead of look for the dark side. And that shifts things. I mean, when you can see the world from a different angle, the world is different then. So I would add that as we practice all these things, I'd say that's another thing to practice.
Can I build on that?
Yeah.
So I would say, Michelle, to your points about building resilience and thoughts lead to feelings, and both of those internally to our actions. I would say that building resilience, 2 things. One is practicing, to Gail's point quickly, learning a different question. I think sometimes when we are faced with uncertainty, our very first question that we may ask, we may feel panic and anxious and whatever, but the first question, at least for me, that comes to my mind is, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? How am I going to get through this? How am I going to solve this? And when you say that, what am I going to do? It's very definitive. It's like you say to your kids, I want you to clean your room. This is what I want you to do. You know, your colleague says to you, hey, could you please do this for me? It's definitive. Your mind is already made up. But instead, if we can train ourselves to think, oh my gosh, okay, you can still do the oh my gosh, what are my options? Suddenly, you have to take a step back. And to Michelle, what Michelle was saying about your thoughts and feelings, when you start to say, what are my options? you are forcing your mind. The only action that your mind is going to do right now is think. That's it. You're saying, mind, look, this is coming at me from left field. Let's just think. Let's just take a moment. Take that moment, zoom out of the situation, look at it from a different perspective, see the whole thing. And then the other thing that I would say with regard to getting ourselves ready to face the future with confidence is be really aware of your values. What is important to you? What are your core values? What are the values that are going to build on those cores? So you have your foundational values, right? And then you have values that you relate to your family, values that you take to work with you, values in your community, and they're all built on top of that foundation of your core. And when you are really sure about your values and you know who you are, what are your non-negotiables? I will do this, but I'm not going to do that. I am okay with that. And you can prioritize your values. Suddenly, now you're thinking, what are my options? What are my values? And you can start to think through, it's not so much taking control of the situation, to what Rebecca was saying, but you just feel a little bit more comforted that maybe this uncertain situation is, somehow you're kind of boxing it in, and you can take control within reason, right? You don't know the outcome. It's that black hole, but you can do what you can to manage your own expectations and set out options. And then you can start look at the picture a little bit differently. So I would say, ask yourself, what are my options? And recognize what your values are.
That's good. I like that.
It just keeps you from shutting your mind down. Your mind shuts down so quickly if you don't ask yourself a more profound question.
Absolutely, because it's so easy to just be a deer in the headlights and to panic, really, because we're all such capable women, and we all have our strengths. And as Gail was saying, you go into a situation and you think, I totally got this. You expect a few bumps here and there, but when you it's a matter of just finding those little bits, like what Rebecca was saying, just find those little bits where you can just feel like you've got some semblance of control. And like I said, I feel like when you have a strong sense of your values, you know what's important to you, you can start looking at opportunities. You can start saying, okay, given the situation, given my values, I can now look at what can I control from this, given with my values in mind, and what can I control that maybe that's relevant, maybe something isn't relevant. What can't I control? Okay, that's okay. And then you can start thinking through, I've got some opportunities, or I've got some, not opportunities, I've got some options rather. So it's looking at things from a different perspective.
Well, Rhonda, I just want to say you have coached us through that very nicely. And it brings me to the thing that's always on me. I got to get somebody else to talk through with me, because otherwise I tell myself a bunch of lies.
Oh, yeah. And that's the other thing, right? Because you build the situation up in your head. And so I think for me, what I like to do is I literally write down, okay, if it's an uncertainty with regard to work, I think, what do I need? What do I really value the most? And then from that level of uncertainty, what can I take control of? What's important where can I bend? Because you still have to have that growth, Carol Dweck in her book talks about the growth mindset. And then you can start to just look at, what are my options? And talking it over sometimes with a friend helps. And if you don't have somebody available at that exact moment that you need to talk or scream or whatever you need to do, at least just to start writing it down. What are my options? What are my options? And start, just one after another, and looking at what's possible. Like for us with the tornado, for example, one of our options was, we live in Dallas, Texas, and I've got two kids, a 14 and a 16-year-old. They're still in school, and I really wanted them to be, we were displaced from our house, and I wanted them to, I wanted to be able to move near where we live, so that while we were displaced, I was thinking of their emotional health. And I didn't want to have to start looking for the new gas station and the new supermarket and everything, because everything's hard enough. So one of our options though was to move to Fort Worth, which I don't know, for those of you who know, it's about an hour away from where we live. And it was an option, but I value stability. And I kept thinking there is no way, initially I was thinking there's no way I'm going to move in with a cousin or friends and just be kind of a vagabond for a little while. But you start looking at your options, you look at your values in relation to those, and you think, wait a second. Yes, moving to Fort Worth is definitely an option, but that's totally going to destabilize my family. And suddenly you think maybe living with a cousin for a little bit isn't such a bad option. And so that level of uncertainty gets, that gap gets a little bit smaller. I'm sure you all can relate to that at some point.
Oh, yes. Okay, so I have one last question, and we've kind of really answered it through a lot of these questions, but to bring it down, and I want each of you to answer this, what is one thing that you believe everybody should do in the face of uncertainty?
So I really have to just pick one.
Well, we have a few minutes, so you can pick a couple if you need to.
I think the first one I'm going to say is to give yourself permission to actually react in a way that maybe isn't particularly ladylike. It's okay to scream. It's okay to take a bat to the bed and beat it if you want. Like, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to be freaking terrified. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to want to, do those things, right? Punch a punching bag, do what you need to do. So I would say, most importantly, honor your initial reaction, because if you don't move it out of your body, it's just going to haunt you. You can't get to the place of looking at options if you're caught in the immediate reaction. So let yourself have it. Number one, let yourself have your immediate reaction and know that it's okay. And there's nothing wrong with you for screaming and swearing. I'm a really good cursor. I'm so excellent at swearing. I have had many years of practice at it. I'm like a 5-star Olympic champion. And so let yourself do it, right? Let you do whatever it is, whatever way it needs to come out of you, let yourself have that, so that then you can start to see options, right? And I think that's key. And then, I mean, the other thing, honestly, is prayer. So I also think that a lot of times, whatever it is, call it what you will, whatever works for you and your belief system, but it's really like tuning into self, tuning into higher self, asking God, whoever you want to talk to, right? Talk to the tree spirits. I'm a big nature person. So, my idea of talking to God is often just sitting at the base of a tree, right? We don't have to know it all ourselves. And so that's the other thing that I would say is right up there, is know that it could be a trusted friend, it could be a tree spirit, it could be a rock, it could be God, it could be your own higher self. But I think that goes along with knowing that you're not always going to know the answer, right? But the answers are there, and sometimes we just have to get quiet within ourselves to be able to find them. So that would be my answer to that.
All right, what do you other ladies think?
I have a similar thought to what Rebecca was saying, and that is turn and face it, stop and embrace the ambiguity, the uncertainty. I had an experience a few months ago where I'm typically not a worrier, fretter, I don't get worked up about things. And I know that's an anomaly for most women, but that's just not my go-to. But a few months ago, I was very much there on this terrible, all-consuming, fretting, worrying, anxiety space. And every day I was desperate to unplug from it, but I just kept moving. Whatever I was trying to get done, whatever was next, I just kept moving. And I was in this kind of agony, and it became this downward spiral for me. So I forced myself to turn around and look, what is this crazy train I'm on? And what I discovered was uncertainty. There was this uncertainty that had triggered some panic in me. And you've probably heard this. Researchers have done some extensive study and discovered that we prefer to know things are going to turn out badly. We prefer that over just sitting in uncertainty, not knowing that it's going to turn out good. That's crazy, but that's the truth. We would rather know it's going to turn out bad than to sit and wait and see if it's going to turn out good. So I had to turn and face uncertainty. So I guess, step one, stop fighting it, because that's not getting us anywhere. Turn and face it, recognize, acknowledge, hey, I'm being overwhelmed by this uncertainty. This is getting me nowhere to just ignore it. So that would be my step one. And then you can do some of the things that Rhonda's already said. And that's just next step is, okay, where do I want to really go? What do I really want? Where do I want to end up after this uncertainty, and start making some better decisions? But definitely turn and face it, embrace it, express it, as Rebecca said.
Gail, what do you think is one thing that you believe people should do in the face of uncertainty?
I'm going to word it this way: take a time out. And just somehow, they used to, 10 deep breaths before you speak, or what, but do something to sort of distance yourself from the issue. And for me, a lot of times it's kind of coupled with going someplace and sitting down and talking about it. That's kind of a timeout. So you sort of get away from the problem, and you get insight from someone you trust to help you sort through it. And with that, all of the things, Rebecca, that you mentioned, sort of putting in order, what are my values? What do I want? What's really the worst thing that could happen here? Nobody's going to die, or are they? All of these kind of things. If there's any way I can just momentarily, or sometimes, for whatever period is appropriate, take a little bit of a time out, process through it, and hopefully do that with someone else.
Rhonda, do you have one thing?
I'm kind of with Rebecca. Building on everybody, it's hard to say just one thing, but I would say, again, just remember that every day is filled with uncertainty, and don't take it personally. When I was diagnosed with cancer, the first thing I kept thinking was, oh my gosh, why me? And so I think I would say, don't take it personally, and know. And lastly, I guess I would say, uncertainty is not it's not forever, and you will grow from it, you learn from it. It forces us to become more resilient in the future. And I think I think it's just knowing that it's inevitable at some things, but not permanent.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much. That's all the questions that I've got. So does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask? You can ask anyone on the panel. Give you a couple seconds to think of that, and whether you want to put them in the chat and I can ask, or you just want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask that. Okay, sounds like we don't. So that's
I agree.
great. Do what, Michelle?
That it's a quiet group.
Yes. So that's all we've got for you guys. I hope that helps. I know it's helped me. I've had a lot of things that are, uncertain every day to think through. And this has definitely given me a way to kind of push through some of that. So thank you, ladies, so much. We so appreciate it. Just a couple of announcements to wrap this up. We have another virtual workshop coming up. It'll be just a little different than this, but it's still a virtual workshop. It's going to be coming up on Wednesday, February the 23rd. If we're really gut honest, most of us would confess to a deficiency in knowledge and skills relating to finances. I'm terrible at it. We weren't taught much about money in schools, and what we learn on our jobs, even if we worked in banking, only addressed the goals and aspirations of the company, ignoring our personal needs. So together, Gail and Rhonda, two ladies on the panel today, will bring information and insights into what may be hidden corners of the financial literacy. So come get a glimpse of that new digital investment craze and peer into the viable paths to begin your own personal freedom. You don't want to get free until you meet someone who is free. So don't try to get financially literate alone. Come and join us on our quest to more financial health. So on Wednesday, again, February 23rd at noon, Gail will be joining us. Oh, sorry, with her mentor, Dr. Rhonda Hollis. I read that wrong. It wasn't this Rhonda. It's a different Rhonda. My fault. I didn't write that down correctly. I'm sorry. So anyway, they're going to talk to you about financial literacy. So that'll be exciting. We'll send more of that out. It'll be in our newsletter for you to sign up on a link, just like you signed up for this one today. So watch for that on our social media or our newsletter so you can get registered. One last thing for you guys. Michelle and I are really excited about this. We've got a free gift for everybody that attended today. We have started a shop on Plaid for Women, and it's a set of affirmation cards that you can download and print. So you're going to get that today for free. If you go to our website at Plaid for Women, on the top menu bar, you'll see shop. You click on shop and it'll open it up and it'll show you Erin's affirmation cards. We had an amazing intern put those together for us. And so we're going to give her that credit for the beautiful work she did for us. If you want to click on that, put it in your cart. And for today only, it is free for you to download those. All we ask is that when you go back after you've purchased, go back to that page where you put it in your cart. And at the bottom, there is an option to review it. If you would give us a review for those, what you think about them, we would really appreciate that. So that's our gift to you, and we're excited about that. And hopefully we'll be building on that as time goes on. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And we'll be sending this video out also to you guys and to anybody that didn't get to come. So if you know somebody that would benefit from hearing this, send that on, and soon it'll be posted on our website as well, so you can check it out there. But thanks for joining us. You guys have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Carol.
Thanks, Carol. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
thanks to everyone for joining us.